John's hands shook as he stared at the empty baggage claim. Max's crate, his lifeline through the darkest battles, vanished without a trace. Panic twisted in his chest while a suspicious package sealed the terminal shut, turning hope into dread. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. John Mason's chest tightened as the realization sunk in. Max's crate was gone. His fingers curled around the leash with a desperate grip, the weight of invisible chains dragging at his mind. This wasn't just a lost piece of luggage. It was a fracture in his fragile stability. The airport buzzed with indifferent crowds, travelers dragging their rolling bags, children whining, couples laughing, and announcements echoing overhead. But John felt like he was drowning in silence. Max had been his anchor through the darkest moments after his tour in Iraq, when the nightmare memories threatened to consume him, when the world spun too fast, when the panic clawed up from nowhere and seized his throat. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a living, breathing lifeline, trained to sense the invisible wounds etched deep inside John's psyche. Every nudge, every calm glance, every firm yet gentle presence was a lifeboat against the storm of PTSD that raged inside. Losing Max, even for a moment, was like losing the ground beneath his feet. The crate wasn't just a container. It was a symbol of safety, a promise that Max would be there when John needed him most. His voice cracked as he called out to the baggage attendants. "Have you seen a black crate? It's locked and has my name on it. Please, it's urgent." His eyes scanned the conveyor belt again and again, a cruel loop of hope and disappointment. The attendants exchanged awkward glances, hesitant to deliver bad news. "Sir, we're checking all the flights, but sometimes bags get rerouted. It could be on another plane or stuck in another terminal," one said with forced calm. The supervisor, Karen Blake, stepped forward. Her expression was professional but distant, like a shield that protected her from feeling the weight of John's desperation. "We follow strict procedures for lost luggage, Mr. Mason," she said, eyes flicking briefly toward a clipboard. "If the crate isn't here, it's being traced. But these things happen. We'll get to the bottom of it." John's throat tightened, anger rising like wildfire. He could almost hear the cold machinery of bureaucracy grinding against the raw, human urgency of his plea. To her, this was just another lost item in a sea of luggage. To John, it was the difference between calm and chaos, life and ruin. He wanted to scream, to shake her until she understood that Max's absence wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a threat to his very survival. Minutes ticked by, unbearable in their slow crawl. Then the announcement: an unclaimed crate had been found in Terminal C. John's pulse surged with reluctant hope. Maybe, just maybe, Max was safe. But that hope was shattered when he saw the uniformed K-9 officers swarm the area, their faces set like stone, the tension in the air thick and suffocating. The terminal was locked down, barriers snapped into place, travelers were herded back, voices rising in confusion and fear. John's heart sank as the irony twisted inside him. Max's crate, the symbol of his safety, was now the cause of a full-scale emergency. He watched helplessly, the leash slack in his trembling hand, as the officers approached the crate with weapons drawn, faces grim. His frustration boiled over. No one understood the stakes for him. Max was more than a dog. Without him, John was a fragile wreck, a man on the edge of breaking. The sharp clang of boots on tile, radios crackling orders, and the cold glare of suspicion surrounded him. The very thing meant to save John from his darkest moments was now a source of panic and fear for everyone else. It felt like a cruel betrayal, a nightmare spun from the threads of miscommunication and neglect. John's mind spun with possibilities. What if Max was hurt, scared, or worse? What if the misunderstanding turned into tragedy? Every second stretched endlessly as John stood rooted, caught between hope and dread, anger and helplessness. The terminal's buzzing chaos became a distant roar compared to the storm raging inside him. The bond between man and dog, forged in battle and trauma, was under siege, not by enemies, but by an indifferent system blind to the human cost. In that moment, John knew this was more than a lost crate. It was a breaking point, and how this fractured day would end, no one could yet say. The terminal's suffocating stillness stretched on, thickening with every passing minute as the lockdown dragged hours into an unbearable eternity. Passengers, once distracted by phones and idle chatter, now simmered with rising frustration. Murmurs grew louder, swelling into shouts. Children whimpered, couples argued, and travelers, those strangers bound only by shared captivity, shifted restlessly against cold metal benches and scuffed linoleum floors. The sterile fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glare on weary faces, turning exhaustion into raw irritation. Outside, the drone of news helicopters punctuated the tension, their whirring blades slicing through the heavy atmosphere as cameras captured every grimace, every whispered complaint, broadcasting the unraveling drama live to an insatiable public. John Mason sat rigidly on a bench, his body taut but shaking beneath a threadbare jacket. The leash that should have tethered Max lay useless in his lap, a lifeless tether to a presence now absent. His breath came shallow, a staccato rhythm that mirrored the pounding in his temples. The weight of helplessness pressed down on him like an invisible vice, compressing his chest until the air itself seemed scarce. The protective shield Max provided, the calm that soothed the storm of memories and fears, was gone, and with it John's tenuous grip on the moment's sanity. The tightness in his chest was a cruel echo of past battles, an internal siege waged by the invisible enemies of PTSD. The sharp flashbacks ignited like incendiary rounds, vivid fragments of sand and smoke, gunfire and screams, overwhelming senses he had long struggled to control. His skin prickled with phantom touches, the sudden snap of a twig in his mind morphing into the crack of distant gunfire. The primal urge to flee or fight surged, raw and desperate, but no Max was there to nudge him back from the edge, to ground him in reality's fragile foothold. Karen Blake's voice cut through the din when she finally returned, fatigue and defiance etched into her expression. The veneer of corporate composure cracked as she disclosed the grim truth. Max's crate had not just been lost, it had been mistakenly routed to an off-site cargo hold, tangled among freight bound for a distant city. The airport's antiquated tracking system, mired by understaffing and neglect, had allowed the error to cascade unchecked. Every word was a blow, a cold confirmation of systemic failure. John's anger ignited into a blaze. This was no accident. It was negligence, a betrayal of his trust and safety. The careless machinery of an uncaring institution had upended his life's fragile balance, threatening to unravel the fragile thread holding his trauma at bay. His fists clenched tight, knuckles white, but before fury could consume him entirely, a figure emerged from the shadows of uniformed faces. Officer David Riley approached with measured steps, his eyes calm yet urgent. The subtle lines on his face spoke of empathy, born from experience, not just duty. "I'm going to help you get Max back," he said quietly, voice low enough to bypass the noise, but heavy with promise. David wasn't just a K-9 officer. He was a veteran volunteer who had walked the same shadowed path, understood the tether between a man and his service dog like no bureaucrat ever could. Together, John and David wove through layers of protocol and suspicion, navigating defensive supervisors, fractured communication channels, and a maze of red tape. David's presence shifted the dynamic, opening doors that had seemed sealed shut. His advocacy was both a shield and a spear, dismantling obfuscation with patient persistence. Finally, the airport agreed to mobilize a special retrieval team, a rare admission of urgency. The news spread through the terminal like a flicker of light piercing darkness. Max was alive. Max would be returned. For the first time since morning, a tentative relief began to ease the tension, a fragile hope blossoming amid the exhaustion. Yet beneath that fragile hope, John carried new wounds, raw and aching, a reminder etched deep that the support system meant to protect veterans was riddled with cracks. The delay and trauma carved a fresh scar on his soul, a testament to how precarious the balance was between survival and collapse. Even as the terminal slowly returned to normal, John's mind remained restless, the echoes of loss and fear still ringing sharp and clear in the silent spaces where Max's presence should have been. The crate's arrival that evening shattered the suffocating silence like a long-awaited salvation. Its heavy wheels clattered across the terminal floor, heralding the end of a relentless ordeal. From within, Max's barking erupted, a sharp, urgent sound, raw with excitement and recognition. The K-9's voice pierced through the haze of exhaustion and despair, igniting a fierce surge of hope deep within John Mason's chest. His eyes, rimmed with red and slick with tears, locked onto the crate as if it were the axis upon which his fractured world could finally spin steady again. John moved with a mixture of urgency and disbelief, his legs almost unsteady beneath the weight of pent-up emotion. As the crate was set down, the latch released, and Max burst free, leaping into John's arms. The reunion was instantaneous, raw, and unfiltered. Max's body pressed tight against John's, a living, breathing anchor in the storm of trauma. Tears streamed unbidden down John's face, a flood of relief, gratitude, and the silent admission of how close he had come to breaking. Around them, the crowd, strangers moments ago bound by shared frustration, erupted into spontaneous applause. The collective release of tension rippled through the terminal, a communal exhale that loosened months of pent-up anxiety and suspicion. The lockdown was lifted, doors swung open, and the sterile, mechanical hum of the airport slowly gave way to the normal rhythms of departure and arrival. But beneath the surface of resumed normalcy, something deeper had shifted. The day's chaos and near tragedy had exposed gaping failures in the system, failures that could no longer be ignored or excused. Karen Blake, once the embodiment of cold bureaucracy, was summoned to a public inquiry that would rip apart the veneer of institutional indifference. Faced with mounting evidence, searing public outrage, and the stark testimony of John's ordeal, the airport was forced into reckoning. Promises of reform spilled forth, urgent, explicit, non-negotiable. Upgraded tracking technology to prevent crates from vanishing into shadowed cargo holds. Mandatory, comprehensive training for all personnel involved in handling service animals, ensuring no veteran would ever be left untethered again. And a new veteran liaison program, a human bridge between those who served and the sprawling, impersonal machinery of travel, designed to safeguard dignity and safety alike. The system, once an unfeeling antagonist, was forced to confront its failings and vulnerabilities, stripped bare before the public eye. It was a reckoning born not only of policy, but of humanity, a recognition that behind every protocol lay a life, fragile and fiercely guarded. John himself stepped into the spotlight at a press conference, his voice steady but charged with the weight of experience. "Max saved my life countless times," he said, the words cutting through the sterile room with undeniable gravity. "Today, it felt like the system failed both of us. But I believe this can change, for every veteran who depends on a service dog, and for every airport passenger who deserves safety and respect." His words carried a resonance beyond personal grievance. They were a call to conscience and action. In that moment, John was no longer just a man who had endured loss. He was a symbol of resilience and hope, a beacon for those who might one day face similar trials. As the press conference ended, John and Max walked away from the terminal, the crowd's eyes following them with a shared understanding. Here was a pair unbroken by injustice, bound by unyielding loyalty and strength. Their steps were steady, their presence a testament to survival, to redemption. The story, once fractured by neglect and fear, found its closure not in mere resolution, but in transformation. The crushing injustice they had endured had sparked something far greater: hope, reform, and an enduring promise that no veteran, no service dog, would face such a battle alone again.